You're about to listen to the most dangerous secret of the 20th century. It wasn't a spy, or a weapon, or a code. It was a moment. One moment given to one person in one room. A moment to decide if the data on their screen was a lie, or the end of human history. This is the story of that moment. It happened 8 times, and the 8 people who faced it have one thing in common. They are the reason you were born. Now, if these people could save the world under that kind of pressure, the least you could do under zero pressure is hit that like button and subscribe. It's a much easier choice, I promise. Number 8, the forgotten mutiny. 1 submarine, 3 votes. 2 said launch. 1 said no. This is the story of the only man who ever vetoed a nuclear war. The air inside the Soviet submarine B-59 was a toxic brew of sweat, fear, and scorching heat. Men stripped naked, gasping in 140-degree darkness, cut off from the world above. Then the thunder came, American depth charges booming against the hull. To Captain Valentin Savitsky, it could only mean one thing. World War III had begun on the surface. He gave the order to prepare their secret weapon, a 10-kiloton nuclear torpedo aimed at the U.S. fleet. By Soviet naval protocol, launching required 3 unanimous votes. The captain voted yes. The political officer, Ivan Maslenikov, consumed by feverish ideology, voted yes. The final vote belonged to Vasily Arkhipov, the flotilla commander. In the suffocating silence between depth charges, he saw the madness in his captain's eyes and remembered the ghosts of sailors he'd watched die from radiation poisoning a year earlier. He drew a shallow breath of the foul air. "No," he said, "we surface. We ask for orders." His was a mutiny against protocol, against panic, against the very logic of the Cold War. For agonizing minutes, he held his ground. The submarine breached the surface into a quiet night, met by American searchlights, not nuclear fire. The 2 officers who voted to end the world were later decorated. Arkhipov was quietly reassigned, his act of salvation considered a dangerous breach of discipline. The man who vetoed Armageddon was erased by the state he saved. Number 7, the 0.46-cent apocalypse hook. In 1980, the world almost ended because of a computer chip cheaper than a gumball. This is the story of the cheapest mistake in human history. Deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, the heart of America's nuclear defense, a single faulty logic chip began to dream of fire. On June 3, 1980, screens in the NORAD command center suddenly screamed to life. 2 Soviet missiles were inbound, then 20, then 220, a full-scale apocalyptic launch. The response was automatic and chilling. Bomber crews sprinted to their planes. The National Emergency Airborne Command Post roared down the runway, and the hotline to the Pentagon's war room lit up. Yet amid the panic, a seasoned officer saw ghosts in the machine. The missiles' trajectories flickered impossibly, leaping from city to city. He demanded verification from the early warning satellites staring at Soviet silos. The response from space was definitive. No launches detected. For 6 minutes, the world hung in the balance, torn between what the radar saw and what the satellites did not. A frantic technician traced the digital scream to its source, a 46-cent integrated circuit in a communications multiplexer. It had overheated and begun generating random data, a phantom war born from a cheap, failing piece of silicon. The same glitch would strike twice more over the next 72 hours, each time bringing the world to the brink. Humanity's survival had hinged on technicians choosing a gut feeling over a machine's certainty, all because of a component worth less than the coffee they drank while deciding our fate. Number 6, the illegal order. In 1983, a Soviet officer received a direct nuclear launch order. He refused to obey it. This is why he was right, and why they tried to erase him. The order did not come on the red phone. It flashed onto the main screen in the Serpukhov 15 bunker in bold crimson Cyrillic. Launch. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, alone on the midnight shift, watched as the Soviet OCO early warning system reported with 99.9% certainty 1 U.S. Minuteman ICBM was inbound. Then a second, a third, 4, 5. The siren wailed. The protocol was absolute. Report the attack immediately to high command and trigger the Soviet counterstrike. Petrov had minutes. His training, his duty, the entire logic of the Cold War demanded he pick up the direct line to the Kremlin. But his mind, that of an engineer, snagged on a flaw. Why only 5 missiles? A decapitating first strike would be hundreds. It made no strategic sense. He remembered the new system was buggy, that sunlight on high-altitude clouds could play tricks. With the clock ticking down toward impact, he committed the ultimate act of disobedience. He picked up a different phone and reported a system malfunction. For 23 agonizing minutes, he sat alone, waiting for the satellites to report the flash of nuclear detonations that would prove him a traitor. The silence that followed was louder than any siren. The missiles were a phantom, sunlight on clouds. Petrov was not rewarded. He was reprimanded for failing to follow procedure, for poor paperwork, for his state of mind during the crisis. The man who saved the world by breaking the most important rule was quietly forced into retirement, his story buried until the state that shunned him had crumbled to dust. Number 5. The wrong turn that saved the world. In 1962, a Soviet submarine got lost. That navigation error is the only reason you're alive today. The fate of civilization often hangs on the smallest of errors. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Soviet submarine B-59 was supposed to patrol a specific grid in the Atlantic, but navigating blind to avoid detection, its crew made a critical mistake. They drifted dozens of miles off course, unknowingly placing themselves directly in the path of a U.S. carrier group. On October 27, the Americans detected an unknown sub in international waters. Following protocol for a potential intruder, they dropped practice depth charges, small signaling explosives meant to say, surface and identify yourself. The boom, boom, boom echoing through the hull convinced the heat-addled Soviet crew that war had begun. Captain Savitsky moved to launch a nuclear torpedo. Yet had B-59 been where it was supposed to be, it would have encountered the USS Blandy. That destroyer's captain, under different rules of engagement, was authorized to use live depth charges against hostile subs. The first sound the Soviets would have heard would have been a hull-rupturing explosion. In that scenario, the vote in the conning tower would have been unanimous for launch. The nuclear war would have started right there. Instead, lost in a drift, they received the non-lethal signal. That crucial margin, the difference between a loud bang and a killing blast, gave Vasily Arkhipov the fragment of doubt he needed to argue. We are not certain. A navigational blunder, a court-martial offense in peacetime, created the ambiguity that allowed a single man to hesitate, and in that hesitation, saved everything. Number 4, the Ghost attack 3 times in 1 year. America's nuclear system detected a full Soviet attack. 3 times it was wrong. The 4th time, they almost fired back. 1979 was the year the machines began to see ghosts. The first phantom struck in February. NORAD screens showed a wave of Soviet missiles. Satellites saw nothing. It was written off as a simulation error. The ghost returned in March, another full-scale attack that vanished when verified. A dangerous complacency set in. Then on November 9th at 8:50 a.m., every command screen in America turned blood red. This was not a limited strike. The computers reported 2,200 inbound Soviet missiles, the entire arsenal. This was the real thing. The response was immediate and total. Bomber crews scrambled, the Looking Glass command plane took off, and National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski was moments from waking President Carter to authorize a counterstrike. He received a third frantic call. No satellite confirmation. We are checking system integrity. Remembering the past ghosts, he held the line. The culprit was found in a back room. A technician had accidentally loaded a training tape, a war game simulation of total annihilation, into the live primary threat assessment computer. The system wasn't tracking real missiles. It was playing a movie of the apocalypse. In the aftermath, a chilling truth emerged. Protocol had been accelerated after the earlier false alarms to prevent deadly hesitation. On November 9th, those faster protocols nearly launched a very real war in response to a reel of magnetic tape. The thinnest line between exercise and extinction was a technician's mistake and one man's memory of a ghost. Number 3. The unluckiest spy. In 1950, a lost weather balloon convinced the U.S. the Soviets had launched a surprise attack. This is the story of the panic that almost started a war by accident. On September 10, 1950, a frantic call reached the Pentagon. A giant silver object was drifting silently over Washington state. Within minutes, similar reports flooded in from Oregon and Nevada, a mysterious craft moving at 20,000 feet. Military command reached one terrifying conclusion. This was a Soviet flying disc bomber on a surprise attack. Fighter jets were scrambled with shoot-to-kill orders. Bomber crews were put on high alert. For 1 hour, the United States stood on the brink of retaliation, believing World War III had begun with a single, silent intruder. Finally, a skilled Air Force pilot pulled alongside the craft. What he saw wasn't Soviet engineering, but tangled wires and torn plastic. A rogue weather balloon from a nearby research station. The invasion was a scientific instrument that had broken its tether. The incident was immediately classified. The truth was too embarrassing. America had almost started a nuclear war over a $500 weather balloon caught in the wind. It was the first and least technological of the Cold War's many false alarms, proving that panic could be more dangerous than any missile. Number 2. The lost transmission. In 1995, a weather rocket took off, and for 6 minutes, Russia believed the nuclear war had finally begun. This is the story of the day the Cold War almost ended, 5 years after it finished. January 25, 1995. The Cold War was over, but its machinery was still awake, paranoid and itchy. At a Russian radar station, an alarm screamed. A high-velocity object had been launched from the coast of Norway. Its trajectory was perfect. The high, lofted arc of a U.S. Trident II missile on a decapitation strike aimed at Moscow. President Boris Yeltsin's nuclear briefcase, the Cheget, was activated for the first time in history. The screen displayed the launch confirmation. Yeltsin and his generals now had 6 minutes to decide. Was this the long-feared first strike? The object was real, a Norwegian-American scientific rocket, the Black Brant 12, studying the aurora borealis. Norway had sent a notification, but it was lost in the chaotic bureaucracy of the newborn Russian Federation. As the clock ticked down, Russian early warning satellites reported back. They saw no missile plumes from American submarines or silos. This discrepancy, radar saw 1 missile, satellites saw 0, created a sliver of doubt. At the final moment, they tracked the object as it veered harmlessly into the ocean. The crisis lasted 6 minutes. The world never knew. The incident revealed a terrifying truth. The end could have come not from malice, but from a clerical error, a lost memo in a fax machine, 5 years after the war was supposed to have ended. Number 1. The General's Gamble. In 1961, a U.S. general was given secret orders to launch 24 nuclear missiles if he couldn't reach the president. One day, all communications went dead. This is the story of the gamble he took with all of our lives. General Jack Shaud's orders were the ultimate secret. In 1961, President Kennedy pre-authorized select commanders to launch nuclear weapons if a decapitation strike severed communication with Washington. Shaud in South Korea controlled 24 nuclear-tipped Honest John rockets. One tense night in 1962, his worst nightmare materialized. Every channel to the Pentagon, secure radio, teletype, even civilian phones, went silent. Simultaneously, reports flooded in of unusual North Korean troop movements. His staff argued the logic was clear. The Soviets had struck, the silence was from EMP blasts, and it was time to execute their missing link authority. The protocol binder sat open. The codes were in the safe. All conditions for a nuclear release were met. Shaud, a veteran of real wars, looked at the panic around him and saw not evidence but fear. He gambled everything, his career, his honor, potentially his country's survival, on a hunch that the silence was a technical fault, not an atomic one. He refused to alert his nuclear units. Instead, he sent a runner to a hilltop with a line-of-sight radio to Japan. The reply crackled back. The world was calm. The global blackout was a freak failure of a single undersea cable and its backups. Shaud's restraint prevented a localized nuclear war that would have ignited the globe. His story was classified for 50 years, a buried testament to the day a general's faith in a malfunctioning wire saved us from a protocol too terrible to ever use. So remember, next time your computer glitches, be nice to it. It could have a worse day. If you want more stories of humans saving the world from their own technology, do your part. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It's much easier than stopping a nuclear war. Thanks for watching.